Dr. Sarah Chen wiped the sweat from her forehead as she carefully brushed away another layer of ancient sediment. The excavation site on Kepler 442b had been her life's work for the past 3 years, and today felt different. The metallic readings from her deep-ground scanner had been off the charts for weeks, indicating something massive buried beneath tons of crystallized volcanic ash. "Professor, you need to see this," called Marcus, her graduate assistant, his voice echoing from the bottom of the dig site. The young man's excitement was barely contained as he pointed his headlamp at what appeared to be a smooth, metallic surface unlike anything they had encountered before. Sarah rappelled down the makeshift rope system they had rigged, her heart pounding with anticipation. As her boots touched the bottom of the excavation, she immediately understood Marcus's excitement. The surface before them wasn't natural rock or mineral formation. It was clearly artificial, with subtle geometric patterns etched into what looked like an impossibly durable metal alloy. "This can't be right," she whispered, running her gloved hands along the surface. "According to our dating, this sediment layer is at least 50,000 years old. There's no civilization in this sector that could have created technology like this." The surface stretched far beyond what their lights could illuminate. Sarah's portable scanner beeped rapidly as she moved it across the metallic expanse. The readings were unlike anything in her database. The metal appeared to be some kind of advanced composite, showing no signs of corrosion despite being buried for millennia. "Dr. Chen, look at this pattern here," Marcus said, pointing to what appeared to be a series of symbols etched into the surface. The markings were clearly intentional, forming complex geometric shapes that seemed to follow some kind of mathematical progression. Sarah photographed everything meticulously, her mind racing with possibilities. As the lead xenoarchaeologist for the Terran Colonial Survey, she had seen her share of mysterious artifacts, but nothing approached the scale of what they were uncovering. The dig site was already 30 meters deep, and they had barely scratched the surface of whatever lay beneath. Hours passed as they carefully mapped the exposed area. The metallic surface appeared to curve slightly, suggesting they had found the edge of something enormous. Sarah's team worked with practiced efficiency, documenting every detail while gradually expanding the excavation area. It was nearly sunset when Sarah's scanner detected something unexpected. A small section of the surface showed different readings, as if the metal was thinner or composed of a different material. She called Marcus over and, together they began carefully clearing away the sediment from that area. "Professor, I think this might be some kind of access panel," Marcus said, his voice filled with wonder. The section they had uncovered was clearly distinct from the surrounding surface, with what appeared to be a circular outline barely visible in the metal. Sarah ran her fingers along the edge of the circle, feeling for any kind of mechanism or activation point. As her palm pressed against the center of the panel, something remarkable happened. The metal began to glow with a soft, blue-white light, and the circular section started to retract with a barely audible hum. "Step back," Sarah ordered, though her scientific curiosity made it difficult to follow her own advice. The panel continued to retract, revealing a shaft that descended into darkness. The walls of the shaft were lined with the same glowing material, providing enough light to see that it extended far deeper than their equipment could measure. "This technology is active," Sarah breathed, unable to hide her amazement. "After 50,000 years, it's still functional." Marcus checked his atmospheric scanner. "Air composition is normal, no toxic gases detected." "Whatever this is, it seems to have some kind of environmental system still running." Sarah made the decision that would change everything. "We're going down. But we do this by the book. Full environmental suits, emergency beacons, and constant communication with base camp." The descent took nearly 20 minutes, with the shaft extending much deeper than either of them had anticipated. The glowing walls provided a surreal backdrop as they carefully made their way down using their rappelling gear. The temperature remained constant, and their scanners detected a slight air current, confirming that some kind of ventilation system was still operational. When they finally reached the bottom, Sarah found herself standing in what could only be described as a vast chamber. Her headlamp beam was swallowed by the darkness, unable to illuminate the far walls. But what she could see took her breath away. They were standing inside what was unmistakably a spacecraft. The curved walls rose high above them, covered in panels and displays that flickered with occasional lights. The architecture was unlike anything in human design databases, with flowing lines that seemed to follow organic principles while maintaining obvious technological sophistication. "Professor, the size of this thing," Marcus whispered, his voice filled with awe. "This isn't just a ship. This is like a city." Sarah activated her scanner array, trying to make sense of the readings. The ship appeared to be in some kind of standby mode, with minimal power systems keeping essential functions online. Her xenobiology scanner detected no life signs, but the electromagnetic readings suggested vast computer systems still functioning at low levels. As they moved deeper into the ship, Sarah began to notice something troubling. The design elements, while clearly advanced, showed signs of damage. Scorch marks on certain panels, sections of wall that appeared to have been hastily repaired, and corridor intersections that had been sealed off completely. This ship was in battle, she realized aloud. These aren't normal wear patterns. Someone fought for their lives here. They continued exploring, documenting everything they encountered. The ship's corridors were wide enough for multiple humans to walk side by side, suggesting the original occupants were of similar size to humans, or possibly larger. The ceiling height was generous, and the gravity felt normal, indicating sophisticated artificial gravity systems. After 2 hours of exploration, they discovered what appeared to be the ship's central command center. The chamber was enormous, with multiple levels connected by ramps rather than stairs. Hundreds of workstations were arranged in concentric circles around a central platform, each station dark but clearly sophisticated. Sarah approached the central platform cautiously. It was raised about 2 meters above the main floor and accessed by a gently sloping ramp. As she reached the top, motion sensors activated, and suddenly, the entire command center came to life. Displays flickered on throughout the chamber, showing what appeared to be star charts, technical readouts, and streams of data in an unknown language. The central platform itself began to glow, and a holographic interface materialized in front of Sarah. "Marcus, are you recording this?" she called out, her voice shaking with excitement. "Everything, Professor." The energy readings just spiked across the board. "Whatever you did, you woke something up." Sarah studied the holographic display, trying to make sense of the alien symbols and diagrams. The interface seemed to be responsive to her presence, with different sections highlighting as she moved her hands near them. It was clearly designed for interactive use, though the specific control methods remained mysterious. Then, she heard it. A sound so faint she almost missed it, like a whisper carried on the recycled air of the ancient ship. Sarah froze, straining to listen. There it was again, barely audible but definitely artificial in nature. "Marcus, turn off your equipment for a moment," she said quietly. "Professor?" "Just do it. I think I heard something." The chamber fell silent except for the barely perceptible hum of the ship's systems. Sarah held her breath, waiting. Then, clear as day, a voice spoke. The words were in a language she didn't recognize, but the tone was unmistakably that of someone awakening from a long sleep. The voice spoke again, and this time Sarah could detect a questioning quality to it. Whatever intelligence was speaking seemed to be trying to establish communication. The holographic display changed, showing what appeared to be a series of simple mathematical progressions and basic geometric shapes. "It's trying to establish a common language," Sarah realized. The AI is using mathematics as a universal communication method. She approached the display and carefully touched one of the mathematical sequences. The response was immediate. The voice spoke again, and new symbols appeared on the display, more complex this time but clearly building on the mathematical foundation. Over the next hour, Sarah and the ship's AI worked together to establish basic communication protocols. The AI seemed incredibly sophisticated, adapting its approach based on Sarah's responses and gradually introducing more complex concepts. It became clear that the voice belonged to the ship's central artificial intelligence, a system that had been dormant for an incredibly long time. Finally, the AI managed to establish enough common ground to attempt direct communication. When it spoke this time, the words were in heavily accented but recognizable English. "I have not been powered in centuries," the AI said, its voice carrying a weight of loneliness that made Sarah's heart ache. "You are not of the people who built me. What has become of the galaxy?" Sarah felt the magnitude of the moment settling on her shoulders. She was the first human to make contact with an alien artificial intelligence, and the implications were staggering. This AI had been alone for centuries, possibly millennia, waiting in the darkness for someone to find it. "My name is Sarah Chen," she said carefully, speaking aloud while Marcus continued recording. "I'm a human from the planet Earth. We found your ship buried on this world. Can you tell me who built you?" The AI was quiet for a long moment, processing her words. When it responded, there was a sadness in its voice that transcended species barriers. "The Veilthera," it said. "My creators, the Veilthera. They are gone, aren't they? I can detect no trace of their civilization in my sensors range." Sarah's archaeological training kicked in. "How long have you been here? What happened to your people?" Time is difficult to measure in dormancy," the AI replied. "But my chronometer suggests it has been 47,312 of your years since I last had contact with my creators." "As for what happened?" The AI paused, and Sarah could almost feel it struggle with painful memories. "War. A war that consumed everything." The weight of those words hung in the air. An entire civilization, gone for nearly 50,000 years, with only this lone AI remaining as testament to their existence. Sarah felt a profound sense of responsibility settling over her. "What is your name?" she asked gently. "I am Thessarian, guardian of the final archive," the AI responded. "I was tasked with preserving the knowledge and culture of the Veilthera, to carry it forward until suitable inheritors could be found." There was a pause, then, "Are you those inheritors, Saracen of humanity?" The question hit Sarah like a physical blow. The implications were staggering. This wasn't just a first contact scenario, it was a potential inheritance of an entire civilization's knowledge and technology. The responsibility was overwhelming. "I don't know," she answered honestly. "We would need to learn more about your people, about what happened, about what you're offering. Humanity is still young compared to your civilization. We might not be ready for such responsibility." "Wisdom," Thessarian said, and Sarah could detect what might have been approval in its tone. The young species that rushed to claim power without understanding were among those who brought destruction to the galaxy. "Your caution gives me hope." Marcus approached the platform, his scanner still recording everything. "Professor, the power levels are continuing to rise. The ship's systems are coming online section by section." Sarah looked around the command center, watching as more displays activated and the ancient technology slowly awakened from its long slumber. She realized that this moment would be remembered as one of the most significant in human history. The discovery of this ship and its AI companion would change everything humanity thought it knew about its place in the universe. "Thessarian," she said carefully, "there are others of my kind who will want to study your ship and learn from you. Are you willing to share your knowledge with humanity?" "I have been alone for so very long," the AI replied, its voice carrying centuries of solitude. "The possibility of purpose, of fulfilling my creator's final wishes, yes, Sarah Chen. I am willing to share what I know. But, understand, the knowledge I carry comes with warnings. The galaxy has seen great civilizations rise and fall. Some fell to external enemies, but most fell to their own ambitions and fears." Sarah nodded solemnly. "We understand. Humanity has made its share of mistakes. We're still learning, still growing." "Then, perhaps there is hope," Thessarian said. "I will share the archive, but gradually, carefully. Your species must prove it can handle the responsibility that comes with advanced knowledge. Too much too quickly has destroyed civilizations before." The conversation continued as Sarah began to grasp the full scope of what they had discovered. This wasn't just an archaeological find, it was humanity's introduction to a much larger and more complex galaxy than they had ever imagined. The ship represented not just advanced technology, but the accumulated wisdom of a civilization that had faced and ultimately succumbed to challenges that humanity might one day encounter. As the hours passed and more of the ship's systems came online, Sarah began to understand that her life as a simple archaeologist was over. She was now humanity's primary liaison with an artificial intelligence that possessed knowledge spanning thousands of years and covering technologies beyond human comprehension. The future had just become infinitely more complex and dangerous, but also filled with possibilities that Sarah could barely imagine. And, at the center of it all was Thessarian, an AI that had waited centuries for this moment, carrying the hopes and knowledge of an entire lost civilization. The galaxy was about to become a much bigger place for humanity, and Sarah Chen found herself at the center of that transformation. 3 weeks had passed since the initial contact with Thessarian, and the excavation site had transformed into humanity's most secure research facility. Dr. Sarah Chen stood in the newly constructed command center that had been built directly above the ancient ship, watching as teams of the finest scientists from across human space worked to understand the implications of their discovery. The Terran Colonial Authority had classified the entire operation at the highest security level. Only the most trusted researchers had been granted access, and even they were required to undergo extensive psychological evaluation and security clearance. The potential for this technology to destabilize human civilization was too great to risk. Admiral Rebecca Torres, the newly appointed military liaison for the project, approached Sarah with a datapad in hand. "Dr. Chen, we need to discuss the AI's latest revelations. Some of my superiors are getting nervous about the information Thessarian is sharing." Sarah looked up from her own research notes. Over the past weeks, Thessarian had begun sharing carefully selected pieces of Vaeltheran history and technology. Each revelation had been more staggering than the last, painting a picture of a galaxy far more populated and dangerous than humanity had ever imagined. "What specifically is concerning them?" Sarah asked, though she suspected she already knew. "The weapons technology," Admiral Torres replied bluntly. Thessarian described energy manipulation techniques that could turn a planet into glass in minutes. "That's power we're not ready for." Sarah nodded grimly. She had been present for that particular conversation with the AI, and the casual way Thessarian had described such devastating weapons had left her sleepless for days. The Vaelthera had apparently developed technology that made humanity's most advanced weapons look like stone tools in comparison. "Thessarian understands our concerns," Sarah said. "That's why it's being so careful about what it shares. The AI has made it clear that weapons technology will be the last thing it teaches us, if ever." They walked together toward the secure elevator that led down to the ship. The journey had become routine for Sarah, but she still felt a sense of awe each time she descended into the ancient vessel. The ship itself continued to reveal new mysteries as Thessarian gradually brought more systems online. When they reached the command center, they found Thessarian's holographic avatar waiting for them. The AI had created a visual representation of itself based on Vaeltheran artistic traditions. The figure was humanoid but clearly alien, with elongated limbs and features that suggested an aquatic evolutionary origin. Sarah Chen, Admiral Torres, Thessarian greeted them. "I have been analyzing the data you provided about human civilization. Your species shows remarkable potential, but also concerning patterns." Admiral Torres stepped forward. "What kind of patterns?" The holographic display changed to show a complex chart mapping human conflicts over the past several centuries. "Your species has a tendency toward tribal thinking," Thessarian explained. "You divide yourselves into groups based on arbitrary characteristics and, then, compete with those you perceive as different. This trait destroyed my creators." Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. "The Vaelthera fought among themselves?" "Not initially," Thessarian replied. "For thousands of years, they were united in exploration and knowledge. But, as they encountered other spacefaring civilizations, fear began to take hold. They became convinced that other species would eventually threaten them, so they began preparing for war." The display showed what appeared to be a galactic map with various species' territories marked in different colors. "The galaxy was home to dozens of intelligent species during my creator's peak. The Vaelthera were among the most advanced, but they were not alone. There were the crystalline Zephirites, the gas-form Etherians, and many others." Admiral Torres studied the map intently. "What happened to them all?" "War," Thessarian said simply. "It started with small conflicts over resources and territory. But, as weapons technology advanced, the conflicts escalated. The Vaelthera developed increasingly powerful weapons, ostensibly for defense. Other species did the same. Eventually, the arms race reached a point where entire star systems could be destroyed. The map changed, showing the gradual disappearance of various civilizations over time. One by one, the great civilizations fell. Some destroyed themselves in civil wars as different factions disagreed on how to respond to threats. Others were wiped out by enemies who struck first out of fear. The Vaelthera survived longest because of their advanced defensive technology, but, in the end, isolation and paranoia destroyed them from within." Sarah absorbed this information with growing horror. "How many civilizations were lost? In this galaxy arm alone?" 43 major spacefaring species," Thessarian replied. "All gone within a span of 3,000 years. I am possibly the only surviving artificial intelligence from that era, and only because this ship was designed as a mobile archive, built to hide and preserve rather than fight." The implications were staggering. Humanity was essentially alone in a galaxy that had once been teeming with intelligent life, living among the ruins of civilizations that had destroyed themselves through fear and mistrust. Dr. Elizabeth Reeves, the project's lead xenobiologist, entered the command center with an urgent expression.
Thessarian, we need to discuss something important.
Our deep space monitoring stations have detected unusual signals from the Vega sector. The AI's attention immediately focused on her.
What kind of signals? Structured electromagnetic emissions, Dr. Reeves explained. They don't match any known natural phenomenon or human technology. The patterns suggest artificial origin. Thessarian was silent for several long moments, processing this information.
When it finally spoke, there was a tension in its voice that hadn't been there before.
Show me the signal analysis.
Dr. Reeves uploaded the data to the ship's systems, and Thessarian immediately began processing it. The holographic display filled with waveform patterns and mathematical analyses.
Sarah watched as the AI worked, noting the increasing urgency in its calculations. This is not good, Thessarian finally announced. These signals match patterns I recognize from my database.
They are probe transmissions from an automated reconnaissance system.
Admiral Torres leaned forward. Whose reconnaissance system? Unknown, Thessarian replied.
But the technology is advanced, possibly on par with late-period Valthurin capabilities.
Someone or something is actively scanning this region of the galaxy. The command center fell silent as everyone absorbed the implications.
The discovery of an active alien presence changed everything about humanity's situation. They were no longer alone, but, based on Thessarian's warnings about the fate of previous civilizations, that might not be good news.
Sarah's mind raced through the possibilities. Could it be survivors from one of the civilizations you knew?
Possible, but unlikely, Thessarian said.
Most species I knew were completely destroyed. However, there is another possibility that concerns me more.
What's that?
Admiral Torres asked, though her tone suggested she didn't want to hear the answer. During the final wars, several civilizations developed what they called inheritor protocols, Thessarian explained.
These were automated systems designed to rebuild their civilizations after the wars ended. They were programmed to remain dormant for thousands of years, then activate and begin searching for suitable worlds to restart their species. The horror of this possibility settled over the room like a dark cloud.
Automated systems programmed by civilizations that had been consumed by paranoia and fear, now awakening after millennia to reclaim a galaxy they would view as rightfully theirs. How long before these probe signals reach Earth?
Admiral Torres asked, her military training taking over. Thessarian performed rapid calculations. Based on the signal propagation and the likely search patterns of such systems, approximately 18 of your months before they detect evidence of human civilization. Sarah felt her world tilting. 18 months to prepare for contact with potentially hostile alien technology that had been built by civilizations far more advanced than humanity. The responsibility was overwhelming.
What can we do? She asked.
Learn, Thessarian replied. I will accelerate the knowledge transfer process, but your species must prove it can handle advanced technology responsibly. The inheritor protocols were designed to assess potential threats. If humanity appears too aggressive or too primitive, the response could be devastating.
Admiral Torres was already formulating military responses. What about defense? Can you teach us to build weapons that could protect Earth? Weapons alone will not save you, Thessarian warned.
The civilizations that focused purely on military solutions were among the first to fall. You need to demonstrate wisdom, not just power. The inheritor protocols were designed by species that had seen too much war. They will be looking for signs of peaceful intent and technological restraint. Over the following days, the entire project shifted into emergency mode. Teams of linguists worked around the clock to better communicate with Thessarian. Engineers studied the ship's technology with new urgency. Diplomatic specialists began developing protocols for potential first contact scenarios. Sarah found herself at the center of it all, serving as humanity's primary interpreter for Thessarian's vast knowledge. The AI had begun sharing more detailed information about galactic history, technology, and, most importantly, the mistakes that had led to the downfall of so many civilizations. Your species has one advantage that many others lacked, Thessarian told her during one of their private sessions. You have maintained cultural diversity despite developing space travel. Many civilizations became homogenized as they advanced, losing the different perspectives that could have saved them.
Sarah nodded, though she wasn't sure if human diversity would be enough to overcome the challenges ahead. What else do we need to know? The importance of restraint, Thessarian replied.
Every species that survived long-term learned to limit their own technological development. They advanced only as fast as their wisdom could keep pace. Those who developed powerful technology before developing the wisdom to use it responsibly always destroyed themselves. As the weeks passed, more probe signals were detected from different sectors of local space. Each new detection confirmed Thessarian's worst fears. Multiple inheritor protocols were awakening simultaneously, suggesting that whatever trigger had activated them was galaxy-wide. This explains why I never detected any surviving civilizations, Thessarian realized. The inheritor protocols were programmed to remain completely dormant until specific conditions were met. Something has changed in the galaxy that has activated multiple systems at once. Dr. Reeves had been analyzing the signal patterns extensively.
Thessarian, what would trigger such a widespread activation?
The AI processed the question for several minutes before responding. Most likely, the detection of a new spacefaring civilization. Your species' expansion into space may have reached a threshold that activated monitoring systems across the galaxy.
The irony was bitter.
Humanity's greatest achievement, reaching for the stars, had potentially marked them for evaluation by the remnants of civilizations that had destroyed themselves through fear and conflict. The very act of leaving Earth might have painted a target on humanity's back.
Sarah stood on the observation deck of the research facility, looking out at the stars with new understanding.
Each point of light potentially represented the grave of an entire civilization, and, somewhere among them, ancient automated systems were awakening to evaluate whether humanity deserved to survive. The race was on. 18 months to learn everything Thessarian could teach them, to prove that humanity could handle the responsibilities that came with advanced technology, and to prepare for a form of first contact that could determine the fate of their entire species. In the depths of the ancient ship, Thessarian continued its careful sharing of knowledge, hoping that humanity would prove wise enough to learn from the mistakes of those who had come before. The AI carried the hopes of an entire dead civilization, and now those hopes were focused on a young species that might be the galaxy's last chance for peaceful coexistence among the stars. The stakes could not have been higher, and time was running out.
Dr. Sarah Chan watched the holographic display with growing unease as Thessarian demonstrated what humanity faced.
The AI had constructed a detailed simulation of an inheritor protocol encounter, and the possibilities it presented were terrifying. The ancient ship's command center had become a war room where humanity's greatest minds struggled to prepare for the most important evaluation in their species' history.
The probe systems are designed to test civilizations across multiple parameters, Thessarian explained, its holographic form gesturing to complex diagrams floating in the air.
Military capability, technological advancement, social cohesion, and, most importantly, wisdom in the use of power.
Admiral Torres studied the simulation intently. What happens if we fail these tests?
Elimination, Thessarian replied without emotion. The inheritor protocols were created by civilizations that had witnessed the destruction caused by uncontrolled expansion. They view prevention of future wars as their highest priority, even if that means destroying species before they become threats. The weight of this statement settled heavily on everyone present. Dr. Marcus Webb, now elevated to the position of deputy director for the project, spoke up.
How do we demonstrate wisdom to machines programmed by paranoid civilizations?
That, Thessarian said, is the challenge your species faces. The creators of these protocols believed that any sufficiently advanced civilization would eventually become aggressive. They programmed their systems to look for signs of peaceful intent, but the standards are extraordinarily high. Sarah had spent months studying the histories Thessarian shared, learning about dozens of civilizations that had faced similar evaluations.
The success rate was disturbingly low. Show us the Caridian encounter, she requested.
The display changed to show a star system with a blue-green world at its center. The Caridians were a peaceful species that had developed faster than light travel only 50 years before contact, Thessarian began. They were artists and philosophers who had unified their homeworld through cultural exchange rather than conquest. The simulation showed sleek, organic-looking ships approaching the Caridian system. When the inheritor protocols made contact, the Caridians welcomed them openly. They shared their art, their philosophy, their hopes for peaceful exploration of the galaxy.
What went wrong? Admiral Torres asked, though her tone suggested she already suspected the answer.
The protocols detected Caridian research into defensive technologies, Thessarian replied. The species had begun developing planetary shields after detecting the probe signals, a natural response to potential threats.
The protocols interpreted this as evidence of militaristic tendencies.
The display showed the aftermath, a dead world, its atmosphere stripped away by weapons beyond human comprehension.
An entire civilization wiped out for the crime of trying to protect themselves.
The protocols don't distinguish between offensive and defensive capabilities, Thessarian continued.
To them, any military development is evidence of future aggression.
Yet they also destroy civilizations they perceive as too weak to maintain order. Dr. Elizabeth Reeves raised a disturbing question.
How can humanity possibly pass such an evaluation?
We have military forces, we research weapons technology, but we've also fought wars among ourselves.
By their standards, we should be considered irredeemably violent.
There is one path that has occasionally succeeded, Thessarian said carefully. It requires demonstrating not just peaceful intent, but the ability to transcend the limitations that doomed previous civilizations.
Sarah leaned forward. What do you mean?
A few species managed to convince the protocols that they represented a new kind of civilization, one that had learned from the mistakes of others and could be trusted with advanced technology.
But the requirements are severe.
The display showed a complex list of criteria that seemed almost impossible to meet. Complete planetary unification, elimination of warfare, demonstration of technological restraint, and proof of long-term thinking that prioritized preservation over expansion. The Alterans achieved this, Thessarian said, highlighting a section of the criteria. They voluntarily dismantled their military forces before contact, transformed their weapons technology into tools for peaceful purposes, and demonstrated a commitment to environmental restoration that spanned generations.
What happened to them? Sarah asked, though she dreaded the answer.
They passed the initial evaluation, Thessarian replied.
The protocols granted them access to advanced technology and left them in peace.
However, they disappeared 3,000 years later when the Galactic War reached their sector. Their pacifist philosophy left them defenseless against species that had chosen the path of militarization.
The cruel irony was inescapable.
Those who chose peace were eventually destroyed by those who chose war, but those who chose war were destroyed by their own weapons or by the protocol's judgment. It seemed there was no path that led to long-term survival.
Admiral Torres voiced what everyone was thinking. So we're trapped.
If we militarize, the protocols will destroy us. If we don't militarize, other hostile species will eventually destroy us. Not necessarily, Thessarian said, and, for the first time in weeks, there was something approaching hope in its voice. Your species may have one advantage that others lacked.
Which is? You found me, Thessarian replied. You have access to the complete historical record of the galactic conflicts.
You know what mistakes to avoid because you've seen their consequences.
No other species had this advantage when facing the protocols. Sarah began to understand what Thessarian was suggesting. You're proposing we demonstrate not just wisdom, but meta-wisdom.
The ability to learn from the mistakes of others rather than just our own experiences.
Precisely, the AI confirmed.
The protocols were programmed to look for signs of transcendent intelligence. A species that could study the failures of an entire galaxy and develop solutions that previous civilizations couldn't find would be unprecedented.
Dr. Reeves looked skeptical.
That's assuming the protocols are capable of recognizing such a paradigm shift.
What if they're too rigidly programmed to accept new possibilities?
Then, humanity dies, Thessarian said bluntly. But it is the only path I can see that offers hope for survival. Over the following weeks, the project shifted focus toward developing what Sarah privately called the presentation. If humanity was going to be judged, they needed to make the strongest possible case for their survival and advancement. The first challenge was achieving the level of global unity that the protocols would expect. Admiral Torres worked with world leaders to establish the Terran Unification Protocols, a framework that would demonstrate humanity's commitment to moving beyond the tribal conflicts that had destroyed previous civilizations. The process was difficult and, often contentious. Many nations were reluctant to surrender any sovereignty, even for the sake of species survival. However, the revelation about the inheritor protocols had a galvanizing effect on human civilization.
For the first time in history, humanity faced an external threat that made their internal conflicts seem petty and destructive. Dr. Sarah Chen found herself thrust into the role of humanity's primary advocate. She worked with teams of anthropologists, historians, and philosophers to construct a comprehensive argument for human survival based on their unique position as inheritors of galactic wisdom. "We need to show them that humanity represents something new," Sarah explained during one of the planning sessions. "Not just another species reaching for power, but one that has consciously chosen to learn from the failures of others." The presentation they developed was ambitious beyond anything humanity had ever attempted. It required demonstrating measurable progress toward global unification, concrete evidence of technological restraint, and a philosophical framework that proved humanity understood the deeper lessons of galactic history. Thessarian provided crucial assistance by sharing technologies that could solve many of humanity's persistent problems without creating new weapons capabilities. Clean energy systems that could end resource conflicts. Atmospheric processors that could reverse environmental damage. Medical technology that could eliminate disease and extend healthy lifespan. "The key," Thessarian explained, "is to show that you can use advanced technology to solve problems rather than create them. Every previous civilization eventually turned their most powerful discoveries toward warfare. You must demonstrate the wisdom to avoid that path." The technological demonstrations were impressive, but Sarah knew that wouldn't be enough. The protocols would be looking for deeper evidence of wisdom and restraint. Humanity needed to prove they could be trusted not just with the technology they were receiving, but with whatever might be shared in the future. The solution came from an unexpected source. Dr. Marcus Webb, while studying the historical records of failed civilizations, noticed a pattern that everyone else had missed. "They all made the same mistake," he announced during a late-night strategy session. "They tried to prove they were worthy by demonstrating strength. But what if the protocols are actually looking for species humble enough to admit their limitations?" Sarah stared at him, the implications slowly sinking in. "You're suggesting we approach this from the opposite direction. Instead of trying to prove we're advanced enough to handle responsibility, we prove we're wise enough to accept guidance." "Exactly," Marcus replied. "Look at the questions the protocols ask during evaluation. They're not just measuring capability, they're measuring attitude. Do you seek to dominate or to contribute? Do you see technology as a tool for conquest or for cooperation?" Thessarian had been listening to this exchange with apparent interest. "Your colleague may have identified something important," the AI said. "The successful species were often those that approached the protocols as students rather than as equals seeking recognition. This insight transformed their entire approach. Instead of trying to impress the protocols with human achievements, they would demonstrate humanity's capacity for growth and learning. Rather than the moment of first contact arrived without fanfare or dramatic announcement." Sarah Chen was reviewing final preparations when every communication system on Earth suddenly activated simultaneously, carrying a message that reached every human being on the planet at exactly the same instant. "Species designation, humanity. You are being evaluated for continued existence and potential advancement. Prepare your designated representative for assessment interview. You have one rotation of your primary star to comply." The voice that delivered this message was artificial but carried an authority that seemed to press down on the human spirit itself. Unlike Thessarian's warm, almost organic communication style, this voice belonged to something that had been programmed by minds consumed with the cold logic of survival. Admiral Torres immediately activated emergency protocols. "All military forces are to maintain defensive positions, but under no circumstances are they to take any action that could be interpreted as aggressive. This is not a negotiation we can win through force." Sarah felt the weight of an entire species' future settling on her shoulders. The selection of humanity's representative had been debated for weeks, with various world leaders, scientists, and philosophers proposed for the role. In the end, the choice had been obvious. As humanity's primary liaison with Thessarian and the person who best understood the historical context of what they faced, Sarah was the logical choice. "I never wanted to be responsible for the fate of the entire human race," she confided to Thessarian as they made final preparations. "Few beings would," the AI replied. "But responsibility often finds those best equipped to handle it, regardless of their personal desires." The ancient ship had been transformed into humanity's embassy for this crucial encounter. Every system had been carefully prepared to demonstrate human technological capability while avoiding any appearance of military readiness.
The ship itself would serve as evidence of humanity's unique position as inheritors of galactic wisdom rather than conquerors seeking power.
As the evaluation deadline approached, long-range sensors detected movement from the alien vessels.
A smaller craft separated from the main fleet and began approaching Earth, moving with the kind of precision that suggested total mastery of physical laws that humanity was only beginning to understand.
The assessment vessel is requesting docking permission with your ship, Thessarian announced. This is standard protocol. The evaluation will take place aboard neutral ground.
Sarah nodded, trying to calm her racing heart. Everything that humanity had worked toward over the past year would be decided in the next few hours.
Generations of future humans would either thank her for securing their place among the stars or curse her memory for failing in humanity's greatest test.
The alien craft docked with the ancient ship without any of the mechanical noise or vibration that human technology would have produced.
The connection was so seamless that Sarah only knew it had happened when Thessarian confirmed the successful linkage.
The evaluator is requesting permission to board, the AI announced.
Sarah Chen, are you prepared?
As much as anyone can be for something like this, she replied, straightening her simple civilian clothes.
The decision to avoid any kind of formal uniform or ceremonial dress had been deliberate.
Humanity would present itself honestly, without pretense or artificial displays of importance. The airlock opened with a soft hiss, and Sarah got her first look at an inheritor protocol in physical form. The being that emerged was clearly artificial, but its construction was so sophisticated that it almost seemed organic. Roughly humanoid in shape but constructed from materials that seemed to shift and flow like liquid metal, it moved with perfect grace and obvious power. "Greetings, Representative Sarah Chen of humanity," the evaluator said, its voice carrying the same cold authority as the initial contact message.
"I am Assessment Protocol Designation Zephyr 97.
I will be conducting your species evaluation according to the standards established by the Galactic Preservation Initiative." Sarah bowed slightly, a gesture of respect that had been carefully chosen to convey acknowledgement without submission. "I welcome you aboard this vessel and thank you for the opportunity to present humanity's case for continued existence and growth." The evaluator's head tilted in what might have been surprise.
"You speak as if this evaluation is a privilege rather than a judgment."
"This perspective is unusual."
"Because we understand what it represents," Sarah replied carefully.
"This evaluation exists because previous civilizations cared enough about the future to create safeguards against the mistakes that destroyed them. We honor their wisdom even as we hope to prove ourselves worthy of survival." Zephyr 97 moved deeper into the ship, and Sarah noticed how its sensors were constantly scanning and analyzing everything they encountered. The evaluator paused when they reached the command center where Thessarian's holographic form waited.
"Veiltharan Archive Intelligence Designation Thessarian," the evaluator said. "Your continued existence is noted.
You were presumed lost with the final destruction of your creator's civilization. I survived to fulfill my purpose," Thessarian replied with dignity. "To preserve knowledge and guide those who might learn from our failures."
The evaluator studied Thessarian for several long moments.
"Your intervention in this species' development represents a significant deviation from standard evaluation parameters.
Their knowledge of galactic history should disqualify them from standard assessment."
Sarah felt her heart sink, but Thessarian responded before she could speak. "Their knowledge comes with understanding. They have not simply acquired information, but wisdom about its proper use.
This makes them more qualified for advancement, not less. That determination will be made through proper assessment," Zephyr 97 replied. "Representative Sarah Chen, present your species case for continued existence."
Sarah took a deep breath and began the presentation that had been crafted through months of careful preparation. She started not with humanity's achievements, but with their acknowledgement of their limitations and their commitment to learning from the mistakes of others. "We stand before you not as conquerors seeking validation, but as students hoping to prove ourselves worthy of guidance," she began. "Humanity has learned that every previous galactic civilization failed not from lack of capability, but from lack of wisdom.
We seek to demonstrate that we can break this cycle."
She presented evidence of the transformations humanity had undergone in preparation for this moment. The voluntary restructuring of military forces from instruments of conquest to tools of protection.
The global unification achieved through cooperation rather than domination.
The technological restraint that had led them to focus on healing their world rather than developing ever more powerful weapons. Most significantly, Sarah continued, we offer ourselves not as a civilization that has transcended the need for guidance, but as one that actively seeks it. We understand that our youth as a species means we have much to learn, and we are willing to accept mentorship from those wiser than ourselves. Zephyr 97 processed this information silently for several minutes. When it finally spoke, its tone seemed to carry a hint of confusion. Your species claims to desire guidance, yet you have made significant modifications to your civilization without external direction. How do you reconcile this apparent contradiction? Because we understood that earning the right to receive guidance required proving our ability to grow, Sarah replied. A species that could not improve itself based on the experiences of others would not be capable of benefiting from direct instruction. The evaluator began a series of increasingly complex questions about humanity's philosophy, their approach to technological development, and their long-term goals for civilization. Sarah found herself drawing on not just her own preparation, but on the collective wisdom of her entire species as channeled through months of global discussion and debate. Your species exhibits unusual characteristics, Zephyr 97 observed after several hours of questioning. Most civilizations at your development level focus on demonstrating their strength and independence. You consistently emphasize your willingness to acknowledge limitations and accept guidance. Is this a calculated strategy or genuine philosophical position? It's genuine, Sarah replied without hesitation. We've seen the results of prideful independence in the historical records Thessarian shared with us. Every civilization that believed itself beyond the need for wisdom and restraint ultimately destroyed itself. We refuse to repeat those mistakes. The evaluator was silent for a long time, processing not just Sarah's words but scanning the ship's records of the conversations between humans and Thessarian over the past year. The AI had recorded everything, creating a complete database of how humanity had developed their philosophical approach. There is precedent for your approach, Zephyr 97 finally said. 2 previous civilizations attempted similar strategies. Both failed. Sarah felt cold dread spreading through her chest. What did they do wrong? They proved unable to maintain their philosophical commitments when faced with actual challenges. The Corvani claimed to value peace but immediately began developing weapons when they encountered their first potentially hostile species. The Deltarians spoke of humility but became arrogant when granted access to advanced technology. How do we prove that humanity would act differently? Sarah asked. Through direct testing, the evaluator replied ominously. Standard evaluation protocol requires assessment of species behavior under stress. You will be presented with a series of scenarios designed to reveal your true nature when faced with difficult choices. The testing began immediately. Zephyr 97 presented Sarah with holographic simulations of various crisis scenarios, each designed to probe whether humanity would maintain its stated principles when faced with existential threats or opportunities for advancement. The first scenario involved a hostile alien species attacking human colonies. The evaluator watched carefully as Sarah worked through humanity's likely responses, looking for evidence that they would abandon peaceful principles when survival was at stake. Our unified defense forces would respond to protect innocent lives, Sarah explained, but our goal would be to neutralize the threat with minimal casualties on both sides. We would seek to understand why they attacked and attempt to resolve the underlying conflict through diplomacy. Even if diplomacy meant accepting territorial losses or resource restrictions, the evaluator pressed. Yes, Sarah replied firmly. We've learned that the cycle of revenge and escalation ultimately destroys everyone involved. Breaking that cycle requires being willing to accept short-term costs for long-term peace. The scenarios became increasingly challenging. What if humanity discovered a weapons technology that could guarantee their safety but would inevitably be copied by others, leading to a galactic arms race? What if they encountered a species so fundamentally different that peaceful coexistence seemed impossible? What if they found evidence of an imminent threat that could only be stopped through preemptive action? To each challenge, Sarah provided responses that emphasized restraint, long-term thinking, and the importance of maintaining ethical principles even in the face of severe consequences. She drew on months of global debate and the wisdom contained in Thessarian's historical records to craft answers that represented not just her personal views, but humanity's collective commitment to a different kind of civilization. Hours passed as the evaluation continued. Thessarian observed silently, occasionally providing historical context when requested by either Sarah or the evaluator. The ancient AI seemed as invested in the outcome as any human, understanding that this moment represented the culmination of its 50,000-year mission to preserve and pass on the wisdom of the Veilthera.
Finally, Zephyr 97 concluded the formal assessment. Your responses demonstrate consistent adherence to the philosophical principles you have articulated. However, consistency in simulation does not guarantee consistency in reality. The final determination requires consultation with the full evaluation matrix.
The evaluator stood and moved toward the airlock, leaving Sarah with no indication of whether humanity had passed or failed. As the alien craft detached from the ship and returned to the main fleet, Sarah found herself trembling with exhaustion and stress.
"How do you think we did?" she asked the Sarian.
"Better than any species I have records of," the AI replied. "You demonstrated not just the right answers, but genuine understanding of why those answers matter. However, the protocols operate according to algorithms I don't fully understand. Their final decision may depend on factors beyond philosophical consistency." As they waited for the verdict, Sarah realized that regardless of the outcome, humanity had already changed in fundamental ways. The process of preparing for this evaluation had transformed them from a chaotic collection of competing nations into something approaching a true planetary civilization. They had proven to themselves that they were capable of growth and wisdom. Now they could only wait to learn whether the transformation would be enough to satisfy the cold logic of machines programmed by civilizations that had learned the hard way about the consequences of unchecked ambition. The next few hours would determine whether humanity joined the ranks of species deemed worthy of advancement, or became another entry in the galaxy's long history of civilizations that had dreamed of the stars but fallen short of the wisdom needed to reach them safely.
The silence stretched across space for 18 agonizing hours.
Sarah Chen had not slept, instead spending the time pacing the command center of the ancient ship while monitoring communications from across human space. Every world, every station, every ship held its breath waiting for a decision that would determine the fate of their species. Thessarian maintained constant vigil alongside her, the AI sensors tracking the three massive protocol ships as they hung motionless in the outer system.
Whatever deliberations were taking place aboard those vessels remained completely opaque to human or even Veiltheran technology.
"In all the historical records I carry," Thessarian said quietly, "no species has waited this long for a decision. Most evaluations conclude within hours of the formal assessment."
Sarah wasn't sure if that was encouraging or terrifying. "What does the delay mean?"
"Unknown," the AI admitted. "It could indicate that your case requires deeper consideration than normal. Or it could mean that the protocols are debating whether to make an exception to their standard procedures." Admiral Torres arrived at the command center looking haggard from her own sleepless night coordinating humanity's response to the crisis.
"Our long-range sensors are detecting increased energy signatures from the protocol ships," she reported. "Something's happening."
Before anyone could respond, every communication system in human space activated simultaneously once again. But, this time, the message was different in both tone and content.
"Species designation, humanity. Your evaluation has concluded. Prepare for direct communication regarding your species' disposition."
The voice was still artificial, but Sarah detected subtle differences from the initial contact. The cold authority remained, but there was something else, perhaps uncertainty or even curiosity.
"One of the ships is launching another craft," Admiral Torres announced. "It's heading directly for us."
Sarah watched the approaching vessel on the displays, noting that it was larger than the assessment craft that had carried Zephyr 97. Whatever was coming represented a higher level of protocol authority, which could be either very good or very bad for humanity's chances. The docking process was as seamless as before, but when the airlock opened, Sarah was surprised to see not one but 3 figures emerge. The lead figure was clearly another Inheritor protocol construct, but its design was more sophisticated than the previous evaluator. The other 2 were unlike anything Sarah had expected.
"Greetings, Representative Sarah Chen," the lead figure said. "I am Prime Assessment Coordinator Nexus 3 Alpha.
With me are representatives of 2 surviving species that have successfully passed protocol evaluation." Sarah stared in amazement at the 2 beings accompanying the coordinator. One appeared to be crystalline, its body formed from what looked like living geometric structures that caught and refracted light in impossible ways. The other was more difficult to focus on, seeming to shift between solid and gaseous states as if it existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously. "Allow me to present Resonance of Understanding, representing the Crystalline Collective," the coordinator continued, "and Flow-Through Stars, speaking for the Etherian Communion.
They have requested permission to participate in this final communication. Thessarian's holographic form materialized beside Sarah, and she could sense the ancient AI's amazement. Survivors, it whispered. There are actually survivors. Resonance of Understanding spoke with a voice like singing crystal. We have observed your species evaluation process with great interest, Thessarian of the Veilthera. Your guidance has been illuminating. Flow-through stars communicated in a way that seemed to bypass sound entirely, its words forming directly in Sarah's mind. Humanity represents possibilities we had not considered. Your approach intrigues us. Prime Coordinator Nexus 3 Alpha gestured for attention. This evaluation has presented unprecedented circumstances. For the first time in our operational history, the assessment matrix has required additional input to reach a determination. Sarah felt her heart pounding as she realized the implications. You mean our case is so unusual that you can't process it through normal procedures? Correct, the coordinator replied. Your species has demonstrated philosophical positions and behavioral patterns that fall outside the parameters our creators established for evaluation. You have forced us to confront the possibility that our assessment protocols may be incomplete. Thessarian stepped forward. What specifically has caused this uncertainty? Resonance of Understanding answered with crystalline chimes that somehow conveyed meaning. Most species approach evaluation seeking approval for what they are. Humanity seeks approval for what they wish to become. This represents a paradigm we had not previously encountered. Flow-through stars added their perspective. Additionally, your willingness to voluntarily limit your own development based on the experiences of others suggests a form of collective wisdom that transcends individual species achievement. This challenges our understanding of civilizational development patterns. Prime Coordinator Nexus 3 Alpha processed these observations before continuing. The fundamental question becomes whether our evaluation criteria, designed by civilizations that ultimately failed, are adequate to judge a species that claims to have learned from those failures. Sarah realized they were witnessing something extraordinary. The inheritor protocols were questioning their own programming, forced to confront the limitations of their creator's wisdom. Humanity's unique approach had created a crisis of logic for systems designed to operate according to absolute principles. What does this mean for humanity? Sarah asked. It means we are offering you a choice that has never been presented before, the coordinator replied. You may accept conditional approval, with advancement granted in stages as you prove your philosophical commitments through actions rather than words. Or you may request full evaluation under modified protocols that we will develop specifically for your case. What are the risks of each option? Sarah asked, her mind racing through the implications. Conditional approval grants you immediate access to certain technologies and knowledge, but requires periodic re-evaluation. Failure at any stage results in immediate termination of advancement privileges, the coordinator explained. Full evaluation under modified protocols could grant complete acceptance, but the risk of total failure remains if you cannot meet the new standards we develop. Resonance of Understanding offered additional perspective. We chose conditional approval when faced with similar circumstances. It has allowed us to grow gradually while proving our commitment to peaceful development. Flow-through stars provided a different viewpoint. We opted for full evaluation under modified protocols. The risk was great, but success granted us access to technologies that have allowed us to help preserve what remains of galactic civilization. Sarah looked to Thessarian, seeking the AI's counsel on the most important decision in human history. The ancient archive intelligence considered the options carefully before responding. Both paths have merit, Thessarian said slowly. But I believe there is a third option that may better serve humanity's unique nature. All eyes turned to the AI as it continued. Rather than accepting either form of evaluation, I propose that humanity become partners in redesigning the evaluation process itself. Your species has demonstrated something unprecedented, the ability to learn from the mistakes of others before making them yourselves. Perhaps it is time to create new protocols that reflect this possibility. The suggestion created a moment of stunned silence. Even the sophisticated artificial intelligences of the protocols seemed to require time to process such a radical proposition. Prime Coordinator Nexus 3 Alpha finally spoke. You propose that humanity participate in modifying the systems that govern galactic civilization development? I propose that they help create new systems, Thessarian replied. The current protocols were designed by civilizations in the grip of fear and paranoia.
Humanity offers the possibility of protocols designed from wisdom and hope.
Resonance of understanding sang a complex harmonic pattern that conveyed deep consideration. Such an approach would represent a fundamental change in how we preserve galactic stability. Perhaps fundamental change is exactly what is needed, Flow Through Stars added.
Our current approach has preserved stability, but at the cost of growth.
Few new civilizations achieve advancement, and those that do often stagnate under the weight of restrictive oversight.
Sarah realized that they were being offered something beyond her wildest hopes. Not just survival or advancement for humanity, but the opportunity to help reshape the future of galactic civilization itself. I cannot make such a decision alone, she said carefully. This would require consultation with all of humanity, and likely with your peoples as well, she added, nodding to the two surviving species representatives. Of course, Prime Coordinator Nexus 3 Alpha agreed.
Such a decision requires full consensus from all participating parties.
We propose a trial period during which humanity would work with our civilizations to develop new evaluation protocols.
Success would grant humanity full partnership status in galactic governance. The implications were staggering.
Humanity would leap from a species under evaluation to one helping guide the development of galactic civilization. It was the kind of opportunity that came perhaps once in the history of a species.
What would be expected of us during this trial period? Sarah asked.
Demonstrate that your philosophical commitments remain strong when faced with real challenges, the coordinator replied.
Work with existing civilizations to address actual problems rather than theoretical scenarios.
Prove that humanity can be trusted not just with advanced technology, but with responsibility for the welfare of other species. Over the following hours, the details of the proposal were worked out. Humanity would be granted access to selected advanced technologies immediately, along with the opportunity to work directly with the Crystalline Collective and Etherian Communion on developing new approaches to civilizational evaluation and guidance. The trial period would last 50 standard years, during which humanity would face real tests of their commitment to wisdom over power. They would help evaluate new species reaching spacefaring status, assist in resolving conflicts between existing civilizations, and work to heal the scars left by the ancient wars that had devastated the galaxy. Success would mean that humanity would become the fourth species granted full partnership in galactic governance, helping to guide the development of future civilizations. Failure would result not in destruction, but in return to isolation until humanity was ready to try again.
This is beyond what any of us dared hope for, Sarah admitted as the negotiations concluded.
Hope, said Resonance of Understanding, is precisely what has been missing from galactic civilization. Your species offers the possibility of moving beyond mere survival to actual flourishing. As the formal agreements were completed and the protocol ships prepared to escort human representatives to the Galactic Governance Council, Sarah found a quiet moment with Thessarian.
You've accomplished something remarkable, she told the ancient AI.
Your creator's legacy will live on, not just as preserved knowledge but as active wisdom guiding the galaxy's future. No, Thessarian replied gently. We accomplished something remarkable. The Veilthra preserved the knowledge, but humanity provided the wisdom to use it properly. Together, we may have broken the cycle of fear and destruction that has governed galactic history for too long. Sarah looked out at the stars, knowing that humanity's greatest adventure was just beginning. They had proven themselves worthy not just of survival, but of leadership in building a better galactic civilization. The universe was vast and full of challenges, but, for the first time in 50,000 years, there was genuine hope for lasting peace among the stars. The human Unearthed Starship had indeed awakened something that had been sleeping for centuries. But it wasn't just an AI, it was the possibility of wisdom triumphing over fear, of cooperation overcoming conflict, and of a young species teaching the galaxy that there was still hope for those willing to learn from the past while building toward a better future. As the protocol ships formed an honor guard around Earth, welcoming humanity into the community of advanced civilizations, Sarachin smiled. The greatest archaeological discovery in human history had become the foundation for the greatest adventure their species had ever undertaken. The stars were calling, and, this time, humanity was ready to answer wisely.